Call in the session the February 21st, 2019 meeting of the Radnor Township Zoning Hearing Board. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Welcome you to join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get to our items of substance, in the absence of having had a January meeting, we did not reorganize the board during a January meeting, so we're going to handle that on this evening. First item for consideration is the nomination and election of a chair. Does anyone want to nominate anyone to serve as chair?
I nominate John Riley.
Is there a second to the nomination?
Second.
Any discussion? In the absence of discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Congratulations, John. Let's switch seats.
Oh, jeez. Thank you. Okay, thanks, Bill. And before proceeding, we want to thank you for your 2 years of service as chair of this board. You've done a great job, and I hope that I can get halfway close to the job you did. Thanks.
I second that.
Here's another chance to second things. The next step of the reorganization is to elect a vice chair. We'll accept nominations.
George Nagel.
Second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any objections? All in favor?
Aye.
George? The tenure continues. Thirdly, what we would also typically include as part of our reorganization would be the appointment of a solicitor for the board for the coming year. We are going to set that aside for this month and revisit that question next month. But with us this evening is Gus Economides, who has been retained by the township to assist this board and other boards when they are in need of legal services. And Gus, we welcome you this evening and we thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure.
Lastly, we would like to adopt a set of procedures for the consideration of cases coming before the Zoning Hearing Board. And typically what we have done in the past is simply rely on the procedures that are appended to the application form that each applicant will provide when they file their appeal with the township. I would welcome a motion from the board to adopt those procedures as the Zoning Hearing Board procedures for the year of 2019.
I would move that the procedures attached to the application be adopted as the procedure for this board for the calendar year.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. That takes care of the reorganization for this evening. So we will call the first case, appeal number 2904. The applicant Anthony and Gloria Mari, property located at 203 Church Street, request an extension of time for obtaining the permit issued under section 280-144 of the zoning code for an additional 6 months to August 24th, 2019. Mr. Murray?
Yes, sir.
Hi, good evening.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. It was a rough and tumble election, let me assure you.
I heard, I didn't know if I was going to come to your rescue back there. I heard the laughing and the giggling back there. That was great.
Thank you. Norman, or you want to swear Mr. Maria?
Yeah. So,
State your full name, please.
excuse me?
State your full name.
Anthony Vincent Mari.
Great, thank you. Kevin, this is, I forget which, it's 2904, I'm sorry. And this meeting's going to be a little bumpy. This is the first time it's been through this process. But this is, could you refresh the board's memory as to when we issued the variance that's the subject of this appeal?
It was a couple years ago. Unfortunately, I think this applicant, as well as some others, have run into an issue with the sewer moratorium. So as part of our ordinance requirements, Section 28144, the relief that's granted expires within 6 months if they do not apply for a building permit. Unfortunately, you can't apply for a building permit because there's no sewer capacity. So he's been in front of this board several times requesting extensions because of that issue, and I believe that is the case tonight.
That's correct.
Okay, and Mr. Murray, I'm assuming that once that moratorium is lifted, you'll proceed with your project with
Correct.
all deliberate speed?
Correct.
Okay, is this a vote for the board? I'm sorry. Okay.
And August 24th is the right date for 6 months?
Yes, correct. It's 6 months from where it was, I think February 24th is when his current extension expires. So we did 6 months on top of that.
Okay, is there anything else you feel the board should need in considering this request?
Let's get this flushing.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this request? Seeing none, I would ask for a motion on the appeal, or the request.
I move to grant the request for an extension as set forth in the application.
And second?
Second.
Any board discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Good luck,
Thank
and
you
I
so
hope
much.
you can get started soon.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Appeal number 3030, which is, involves the applicants, Waynestone Group LLC, Martin and Janet Marshall, the property located at 148 East Lancaster Avenue and Zone WBOD, the Wayne Business Overlay District, seek a special exception pursuant to Code Section 280-101A1 in order to convert the pre-existing non-conforming first-floor office use to a non-conforming residential use, which applicant plans for the entire structure. Applicant also seeks special exception or variance pursuant to Code Section 280-101A2 in order to place a two-story garage addition at the rear of the existing building. Second story of the garage will constitute additional living space as part of the residential use and thus will enlarge the area devoted to a non-conforming use. Counsel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim Greenfield on behalf of the applicant, Waynestone Group. As you pointed out, this is a request under 280-101, and the purpose of the request is to convert really the first floor of what has been an office building from one not lawful non-conforming use to a new non-conforming use, which is specifically allowed by 280-101A. The building at 148 East Lancaster has been an office building for decades, and we're going to put on evidence to establish that. When the Wayne Business Overlay District ordinance was approved in July of 2007, it established that you needed to have a retail use on the first floor. So the office use that had existed on the first floor of this structure became, at that point, non-conforming. And what the applicants, Mart and Janet Marshall, want to do with the property is turn it into a dwelling. The structure itself is currently about 1,900 square feet. That's the footprint. It's a three-story building. It's by deed restriction actually set back about 40 feet from Lancaster Avenue, which is unusual, as you know, in that district. And the building itself is approximately 100 years old. The applicable sections of the Business Overlay District sections of the code 280-53.7 is the first section that's applicable that governs the use in the district. And specifically, subsection B indicates that dwelling units, office or studio, when located above a first floor retail use, that's when those uses are ordinarily permitted. The other applicable section is 280-53.10, which talks about the use of a redeveloped building and how those uses must be allocated within such a structure. So we're going to put on two witnesses for you tonight. And for our first witness, I'm going to call Mark Cummins, who's a former owner of the building. You have to be sworn, Mark.
Raise your right hand. Did you solemnly swear or affirm that testimony you're about to give will be the truth and the truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
And state your full name and spell it for me, please.
It's Mark Cummins,
Spell it.
Spell it.
C-O-M-Y-N-S, and it's Mark, M-A-R-K.
Mr. Cummins, are you a former owner of the building at 148 East Lancaster?
Yes, I am.
What's the name of the entity that owned the building when you were a part of it?
It was called,
Sorry, I can't hear.
so,
Yeah, please speak into the microphone,
it
sir.
was called 148 East Lancaster LLC.
Were you a member of that LLC?
Yes, I was.
And at the time, what was the date of the purchase of the building by 148?
It was June of 1998, I think, right around there.
Prior to the time that you bought the building, were you aware of how it was being used?
When we purchased the building prior to inspection, there was an existing tenant. I'm sorry, there was an existing tenant prior to the purchase of the building that I was aware of.
And there was one tenant in the building at that time?
Yes, there was only one.
Who was that tenant?
Actually, it was Hope Worldwide. It was called Hope Worldwide.
Was that a charity?
It was a nonprofit, yes.
Nonprofit. Did they occupy the entire building at that time?
Yes, they did.
And when you bought the building, did you move into it?
We did move into the third floor. At the time, they had a fair amount of their employees there, and they just kind of moved downstairs. They occupied the third. We requested that they move prior to us buying the building, which they did move downstairs.
So Hope Worldwide at that point continued to occupy a portion of the building.
Correct.
And the use that they made of their portion of the building was offices?
Yes,
At some point, did they move out?
they did. I think about within a year, they did move out, and they purchased a building across from Manila's Diner.
And did you have other tenants in the building after that time?
Well, immediately when they left the building, we did contact a realtor, and we did, a company moved in and occupied the first floor and the second floor, yes.
So after Hope Worldwide left, you had other tenants on the first and second floors, correct?
Correct.
At any time during the period that you owned the building, was the first floor used for anything other than offices?
No, never.
Okay. And you then sold the building to Waynstone Group?
Correct.
You're familiar with the drainage facility, the stormwater management facility located in the back corner of the property?
Yes.
Do you know how that facility came to be located there?
Yes, when the back property was purchased, I think from, well, the owner, I'm not quite sure of the name of the company, Cass Holloway purchased the back property, and he contacted me and asked if he could meet with us, and basically he ended up asking permission for us to, for him to put his drainage on our property, which we, at that time, formally agreed in a business agreement where him and I represented the company, and we agreed on a financial, where he paid for his drainage to be on our property.
And was it your understanding that that was because his building came right up to his property line?
Yes.
Do you know if that easement remains in place today, or at least did it remain in place at the time you sold the building?
Yes.
And who, under that easement, who has the obligation to maintain that stormwater facility?
Our agreement, which I think transferred at the time of our sale, it was between 148 Lancaster LLC and the condo association of the back property.
So it's the condo association that has the continuing obligation to maintain that facility?
That's correct.
That's all the questions I have for Mr. Cummins.
Are there any questions from the board?
What's the current occupancy of the building?
Current occupancy?
Use occupant, who's in there? You have tenants?
No, the building there's a demolition permit's been issued by the township for internal demolition. And the building's being torn down and on the inside.
Okay.
And it's going to be reconfigured.
Okay, so there's no tenants in there currently?
Correct.
And how long has it been empty?
Well, when we sold at settlement, I had another company, Wharton Advisory Group, occupied the entire building. I'm sorry, the Wharton Advisory Group occupied the entire building. So.
And when did they vacate?
At the time we sold after settlement.
And what
When
date
was
was that? I'm sorry.
That was probably July, I think it was in July this year.
July of 18, correct?
18.
Yes, I'm sorry, 18.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else from the board for Mr. Cummins?
Okay, continue.
Janet Marshall?
Yes, I do.
Jim, could you switch spots maybe so that
Sure.
you're looking at me?
Okay.
Here. Oh, okay, all right.
Does this work?
fine.
Yeah.
Mrs. Marshall, are you here on behalf of Waynstone Group?
Yes, I am.
And that's the current owner of the property at 148 East Lancaster?
Yes.
Are you a member of that LLC?
Yes.
And let me show you some pictures. I want to get you to identify some pictures of the property.
Okay.
Excuse me. I think is the board going to mark our application package as our Exhibit A1?
Yes.
Okay, we would ask that that be done, and even though the pictures are included as part of that package, we're going to make that A2, and I'll pass those up to the board. Well, I think the whole application package would be A1. That includes the deed. That's all right with the board.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And these photographs are in addition to what was in the package?
They're actually the same, but I wanted to
Okay.
break them out. so that we
Okay.
don't-
Well, I'd identify these separately as A2.
Yeah.
And let's number each of these. So A2 -1 will be the top photograph on the first page. A2-2, or A2-2 will be the second. A2-3 will be the bottom photograph on the first page. A2-4 will be the left photograph on the top of the second page. 5 will be the right photograph on the top of the second page. And 6 will be the bottom photograph on the second page. Sorry, thank you.
Mrs. Marshall, would you please take us through these photographs and tell us what they show?
Okay, the first one is and the first and second are both front views of the building. And the third one is the rear view of the building.
Okay, let's
It's from
reflect
the-
that
Oh, from, I'm
A2,
sorry,
1,
it's
and 2
from.
are the first two and
Okay,
3.
first two.
All right, so the photo at the bottom of the first page, which I think is A2-3,
Yes.
that is what's that a view toward?
That's a view towards the Cass Holloway's condos that back up to our building, and the storm drains in the corner,
The bottom right corner.
bottom right corner,
Okay.
yes.
If you go to the second page, please. All right, A2-4, which is the top left photo on the second page. What is that?
I think that's the left driveway.
Okay, and so that's the west side driveway on the
Yes.
property?
Mhm.
And what's A2-5
That's,
to the right?
that's the rear of the property.
You see fire escapes there. Is it your intention to keep those?
No.
And then the bottom photo, A2-6, on the second page of the exhibit.
That's the storm drainage.
All right. Now, you want to convert the property to residential use, correct?
Correct.
Why do you want to do that?
We think it's a beautiful building, and we'd like to enhance it with like green space and landscaping, shutters, make it more residential.
Other than the removal of the fire escape, are there other changes that you want to make to the property?
Just adding a garage to the back with a second-story living space.
So the garage, now on the plan, the garage is shown as approximately 28 by 36. Is that the size garage that you want to build?
Yes.
A3. Let the record reflect the plan will be entered as A3.
A3,
A3.
great, thank you. And the board will note that the proposed configuration is on the right side, and it shows a garage of 36 by 26. Now, you want to put residential space on top of that garage, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
I should note to the board that we're asking for a variance for permission to add
The
that
garage.
living space on top of the garage. Why is it that, oh, by the way, are you going to add an elevator? to
Yes,
this
we are.
property?
We're going to add an elevator.
So will you point out to the board on the plan where the elevator is going to be located?
Do you know, I'm not 100% sure. I think right in here.
Okay. So at the, what would be the southwest corner of the building, northwest corner of the garage, correct?
Correct. That's not for sure, I don't think. That's what the architect is planning right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Why is it that you want to add a garage and an elevator at the rear of the property?
My husband has medical issues with his legs. He has a handicap sticker or whatever, and he needs an elevator for sure. And then the garage, the driveways are a hill, and they're going to be icy, and we think safety, pull the car into the garage for him, get in the elevator and go right up. Okay.
Are you going to do anything on the front of the property to change it?
Just make a lawn, landscape, maybe shutters, lanterns, that kind of thing. A hedge.
In terms of
Excuse me,
traffic,
Jim?
you're going to use this.
Just,
Yes.
you may have said this, I'm missing it. Upon completion, is it a single-family home or is it multiple
Yes.
units? What?
Yes, single-family home.
Single-family home, thank you.
You're welcome.
In terms of traffic, you're going to use the structure only for single-family residential purposes, right?
Yes.
Do you have any school-age children?
No.
Um,
College.
College?
Yeah.
You won't be entertaining any office visitors, correct?
No.
You're not going to be doing any manufacturing on the
No,
property, right?
no.
So you won't be creating any noise or dust or smoke or anything
No.
like that?
Just grandkids.
Just grandchildren?
Yeah.
Those are all the questions I have for Mrs. Marshall. The board may have some.
Any questions from the board?
On the addition in the back, you said there's residents on the second floor. It's going to be a two-story addition, is that it?
Yes,
Correct.
So it won't go as high as the existing structure?
no.
Right. Now, the back of the property slopes downward from Lancaster Avenue back toward,
Mr. Rich.
back toward School Lane, back toward the condos back there. So I believe, and Mrs. Marshall, perhaps you can tell me, but the second level of the garage will come up to about the same point as the first floor of the residence, correct?
The
Is
second
that the
level.
plan?
I think the second level,
The second level.
second level, yeah.
All right.
The garage must be very tall, I guess. I think,
Right.
'cause I don't think that, we don't need space on the first level.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Greenfield, are you, I just want to make sure, if you were to build, just for argument's sake, the second floor, you'd have that by code, because it's the second floor. So you're not
Well,
seeking anything,
If in fact the garage is going to be tall enough to have the second story of it be flush with the second floor of the building, I would take the position that
Okay.
yes, that should be permitted, but it's,
but since the garage will be on the first floor,
It
it's
might
part
be
of, yeah, okay.
downside.
I just want to make sure
Yeah.
I got what you're asking for.
yeah, so and Kevin can probably chime in on this. He suggested that we ask for a variance on this, but I suppose it could be construed that all we need is a special exception for that part.
At the point when we were reviewing this application, we weren't quite sure if the square footage and what, I don't think you had the plans for the garage finalized at the time, but the concern was when you expand a non-conforming use, there's a calculation limitation in the code on that, and we just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to get there as they start to develop this plan and move into the building design, some things shift, and didn't want that to run into an issue where, because of a building code issue, that wasn't then in violation and would had to bring them back here just because it was a building code requirement that could possibly put them over that threshold.
I was giving you my next question if you had an elevation, but I guess you don't.
And that threshold is 50% increase?
That's 280-101A2, I forget what the...
And if that's the case, where are we? I mean, are we bumping up against 50% or?
Well, in terms of the living space that we would be adding and the garage itself, that would appear to be under 50%, because the footprint of the building is 1,912 square feet, as indicated on the plan.
Okay.
And the garage is 936 square feet. So that addition, I think, would be under 50% on both footprint and floor area. And then the elevator is not going to be living space. It's going to be all mechanical.
Is the space of the garage counted into floor area, or is it only the habitable portion?
They talk about the area of the use, so you could argue one way or the other. I try to take a more conservative look and say, well, the use of the garage is part of the residential accessory use to the residential use. So we would count that in a more conservative fashion. But if the square footage of the footprint of the building is 912 and the footprint of the garage is 900, and the dwelling or the building is currently 3 stories,
Right.
so 19 times 3 versus 900 times 2, you're still less than the 50%.
But notwithstanding that, you're requesting the variance
Just in case.
out of the abundance of
Yes,
caution.
just to cover the base.
Could you go back to the earlier conversation regarding the easement and the drainage?
Yes.
What are the implications to the plans to the pre-existing arrangement regarding drainage?
Well, I think there are no implications, because under the terms of that easement, the condo association behind this property is obligated to maintain that stormwater drain. And that obligation will continue. That easement runs with the land.
And the stormwater drain area is not impacted by where the garage is being constructed?
No, because this entire property is now impervious, essentially, correct?
But
Yeah.
the drainage will be accessible following the construction of the garage.
Yes. Oh, yes, it's not going to come close. That storm drain is back in the corner. We're not going to come close to it.
Thank you.
Kevin, I just want to make sure I get, so you are going to ask for a variance on the use, but you're not asking for a variance for over 50%? Okay, good. All right. Just want to make sure that I got that.
Right.
Rough calculations are about 33% increase in floor area, doing, you said 930 square feet for the garage?
Yeah, I have 936 for the garage.
So that equates to about 1,872 square feet of additional living space versus the 5,736 that currently exist. So.
I think it's pretty clear that the use we're proposing here under 280-101A is certainly less intrusive than the use that was already there. It's certainly a more favorable use in terms of its impact on the community. And basically that's the standard under 101A. So for the special exception part of it should be no issue as far as we can tell.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, Kevin just sparked something. Hey, Kevin, are you sure it's not the calculation of just the first floor, which is the non-conforming use, when you're doing the calculation of 50%? Because the upper floors are conforming because she's going to be using it for residential. It's the first floor that's not going to be conforming. I want to make sure I read it right. The area devoted to the non-conforming use shall in no case be increased by more than 50%. I just want to make sure it's not the first floor area that you're using to calculate the 50%.
I was calculating based off the entire
That's what I
building,
thought- that's what I
but
thought.
if you look at it, that the garage would be, because the addition in the residential component would be on a second floor, and second floor residential is permitted in this district. So you would be taking the area of the garage at 936 over the area of the first floor, which is 1,912, is still less than 50%.
Yeah, just barely. but-
Something to be concerned about with the architect.
Yep. Any other questions from the board?
No.
Thank you, that's all we have. for you.
Okay, to kick off. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll get the hang of this, yeah.
Yeah, we moved the exhibits as well.
Yes, thank you. We'll accept the exhibits as moved. Are there members of the public who would like to speak to this application? Seeing none, to begin our discussions, I'd welcome a motion regarding the application.
I'm just trying to make sure that I get the standard review right. If we're looking for special exceptions or variances, because obviously both are different standards of review with hardship versus non-hardship. So does anyone following what, I know it's a special exception under 101A and 101B, but also a variance?
Ms. Greenfield, if you want to.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Again, just summarize the exact relief that you're looking for so that we can begin our discussions.
Yes, we recognize that we need a special exception to convert from one non-conforming use to another for the first floor of the structure under 101A. In the event that we need a variance rather than a special exception to add the living space that'll be over the garage, I mean, again, we feel that because it's going to be flush with the second floor, it should be permitted under code, because anything above the first floor can be residential. And you can have some combination of uses even if you wanted to, although we're not proposing that. So I think that, first of all, I think it's probably not a variance request for the extra living space over the garage, but if you deem it to be that way, we think there's a rationale for it. We certainly need the garage because of the disability of Mr. Marshall, and the extra living space will supplement that, and the elevator will supplement that.
Does that answer your question, Brad? Because I'm still not 100% there.
Mr. Chairman, I just looking at the application, I believe they need a special exception from 280-101A1
For the
for the
use.
change of use, and a special exception from 280-101A2 for the increase in the area of a nonconforming use.
But that would be in excess of 50%.
No, it's still 50%. It's less than 50%, so
Yeah, that's why it should still be a special exception for the additional use on the second floor.
So they're both special exceptions.
If it's special exception is our measurement, I'm fine. I'm good.
Why don't you make a motion?
Okay. I make a motion to approve a variance, a special exception under 101A1 to convert the first floor to a nonconforming use for residential purposes, and also to grant a special exception to expand a nonconforming use under 101B2. A2. A2, thank you. Thank you. I wrote it down.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Board discussion.
I'm sympathetic to it because to me it's a balance of interest. There's nobody here from the community objecting. You know, there's some, you'd have a theoretical question regarding whether it would be better to have retail there on the first floor, but I'm not in the business of raising those issues, you know, on our own with there not being a community interest. So I'm fine with it because of that.
Yeah, I'm in favor. I don't think it's detrimental to the surrounding area.
Participating in this one, and then Raul, when I'm, okay. Scott, any thoughts?
No, I agree. I think it's a good project.
All right, I will call the motion to a vote. All in favor of Brad's motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? No opposition? Thank you, and good luck. Thank you. Okay, before we proceed with Appeal 3031, I am recusing myself from consideration of this appeal. So the newly minted, the once and newly minted Vice Chair, Mr. Nagel, will handle this one, and I will be stepping out of the room.
Do you have that email? Thanks.
Hi, George.
Ready to go? Yep. Okay, so this is appeal number 3031. Applicant seeks to construct an addition to the rear of its existing building. The site is legally nonconforming in regards to the number of off-street parking spaces. Applicant shall maintain the existing number of parking spaces, but requests the ability to provide the stacking of a number of the spaces. As a result, the applicant seeks a variance from Section 280-4 and/or Section 280-103B of the zoning code regarding the size of the parking spaces and their accessibility to a driveway. In the alternative, applicant requests a variance from Section 280-103B, subsection 20 of the zoning code regarding the required number of on-site parking spaces or such other relief from the zoning code consistent with the exhibits presented. We have had some discussion regarding the timing of this appeal, and considering that there are land use elements to this, that at least we've determined that this should be at the Planning Commission at this point, prior to coming to the zoning board hearing. Do you have any thoughts on that, Nick?
Yeah, I got a call from Kevin about, 3 or 4 this afternoon advising me of that. So
Right.
I was aware of the issue. I did look just so that the board's aware, there was a land development application made on this project. It really involves an addition to the existing building. This is just related to the parking requirement and the parking design of the existing parking lot, not the building itself. There is a land development application pending before the Planning Commission. One of the comments that we received back from the township engineer was that we needed relief on the parking requirements, mainly because of the size of the parking spaces and the availability of the parking spaces without being limited in access. As a result of that, we made the zoning application to the zoning hearing board. It is true the Planning Commission has not seen, they've seen the application, but we have not appeared before the Planning Commission yet. Our application to the zoning hearing board was a result of one of the comments received from the consultant's letter from the township. As a result, we filed this appeal to the board. It was filed on January 22nd of this year. As I mentioned, Kevin spoke to me today and stated that he thought it should have to proceed to the Planning Commission. I know that 280-142 of the zoning code indicates that appeals regarding a land development shall be forwarded to the Planning Commission prior to public hearing before the zoning hearing board. It further provides in that section that the failure of the Planning Commission to review an application shall not invalidate any action taken by the zoning hearing board. We're ready to proceed here this evening. You'll hear testimony from Mr. Smythe, the owner of the dealership, indicating that much of this is being driven by Jaguar, the corporate entity, as far as having to do renovations to the building. And as a result, we would request to proceed here this evening, but we understand certainly, of course, if the board determines that it should be considered by the Planning Commission first as well.
Gus, I would ask, we would have time to hear this next month?
Well, you do have, it sounds like a full schedule. I mean, we could put it on that, obviously, you might have to put it on there, and if we finish that night, we finish that night with all the applications. I can't say off the top of my head whether or not you'll be able to hear all of those applications or not.
This would take preference over some of those applications.
Because of the timing?
Yeah, because of the timing.
Right.
And
But I mean, do you disagree that, I mean, based on 142B, it doesn't seem to give this board discretion that they need to hear from the Planning Commission first, Mr. Keneally, I mean.
Yeah, although it does say that the failure to hear from the Planning Commission doesn't
Correct.
validate action of the board.
Understood. But
And
they haven't even had an opportunity yet.
We understand. We understand the situation, but we also would like to proceed.
Of course, no, and we understand that as well. I mean, obviously, I think the board wishes this was brought to everyone's attention earlier. When, if you don't mind me asking, when are you scheduled to go before
March the 3rd, whatever the first Monday of March is
Okay.
listed. And certainly, I believe Kevin or Steve Orsini will list this matter if the board decides to continue it to the March zoning hearing list. Both, as of now, the application itself on the land development, as well as this application before the zoning hearing board would be on that list, Kevin?
Yes, I would try to get that on there. I was not able to get confirmation of that from Township Engineer today. The goal would be to schedule this at the same time Planning Commission's reviewing the land development.
And Nick, Ms. Keneally, can we, and I'm assuming you'll consent to the continuance that the board's seeking?
You have the time to do it, and certainly that we would agree that the board has 45 days from the required hearing date to issue an opinion.
Thank you.
I want to play devil's advocate for a second. They're not here for a variance associated with the building. It has to do with the parking, which I think is a distinction worth being aware of. Is it worth considering hearing the evidence and taking the matter under consideration, waiting to see if we have any input from the Planning Commission following their March meeting, and then voting it in March, both to be more efficient with our time and to save these guys the effort of coming back a second time?
Just to say, my concern would be is, let's say go to the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission says you need to shrink it. And we've given a variance for something that they don't need anymore. I just think they're too linked, two things. I mean, you wouldn't be asking for a variance of the parking spaces if you weren't doing an addition. I think if they were separate, Nick, I'd be fine with it. Like, you needed it anyway. But to me, in my opinion, it's linked, and honestly, what I was going through my head, which I thought you were going, is, all right, we hear it. We give you a variance, and someone appeals it and says it wasn't ripened. And then we're gonna have to do this all over again.
Although I think what Bill was saying is.
I know,
You wouldn't rule on it. Yeah, you wouldn't rule on, and certainly if the planning commission said, hey, we hate this, I would want the opportunity to present evidence as to why they shouldn't hate it. You know, if one of the recommendations come back and.
So you're saying hear it, but don't rule.
That's the thought.
That's up to you. I mean, that's.
Well,
In a way, it doesn't really matter to us because we wouldn't be getting a ruling, so whatever is more convenient with you is fine.
My thought is, let's hear it tonight. Good people here have shown up to come to this meeting tonight.
Absolutely. It's your discretion, and if you're not making a decision tonight, then I don't think you're violating that section.
Right, and I think that's the point. I think Bill has a great suggestion there that we hold off the vote and take good notes so nobody forgets. Hold off the vote until our March meeting.
So in that case, I will recuse because I will not be here for March. So I probably shouldn't listen to it. And so we should get an alternate that will be here
Yeah,
to
my
listen.
only concern is now we go down to 4. That's,
I hear you.
yeah. I know.
Mr. Chairman,
But if this is, put it this way, this is going to be continued in March. I will not be
If
here.
you're not going to be here, and it has nothing to do, because Brad, I have no idea how you're going to rule on this, but I'd rather take my chances with 5 or 3 than with 4 for obvious reasons that ties I lose, or we lose on ties, so.
Mr. Chairman, one other thing,
that
and
would be the
I like
case.
the idea of possibly hearing this, but the language of the code says that it's forwarded to the planning commission prior to a review at the public hearing. So if you're going to hold the public hearing, portion of the public hearing prior to it being forwarded to the planning commission, I think that could create some issues. And in addition, we're not quite sure what planning commission may or may not offer. There have been instances where a land development has required zoning hearing board. It went through planning commission, and during that process, they were actually able to refine the relief to reduce the amount of relief that was needed. So you could hear some testimony tonight that ends up being changed based off of input and dialogue with the planning commission.
Scott or Roel, you have any thoughts? I'd like to move forward here. Yep.
It sounds like to me we're going to have this represented anyway, depending on what happens. So as much as I agree, given kind of what's on the agenda for the next meeting, that it would be helpful to hear some of this in advance, and taking into consideration, obviously, you know, your stance basically on taking the numbers down to 4. I'm sympathetic to that and would be willing to kind of hear it during the March meeting, recognizing, of course, that creates a potential scheduling, you know, kind of issue for us, but.
Well, I think with the ambiguity we're discussing here, I think it's probably the best course. It's an inconvenient course, but to continue it to the next meeting.
And we'll, as I mentioned, you don't need a continuous from us because you do have time to hear it at the next meeting. That's within 60 days. And certainly, we agree that the board has 45 days from that hearing.
Issue the ruling.
To issue a written decision.
Okay. So do we have to pass a motion on that, Gus, or anything? Just,
I do think you should make a formal motion referring this to planning
okay, can I hear a
and
motion?
continuing it to the next
Yeah.
month.
Motion that we request Planning Commission to review the application and to report back to us with any comments, and to continue it to the March meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes, so we'll hear it next month.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, for the next appeal, who will be participating? It's your turn, Raul. Okay. All right, the last agenda item for this evening, Appeal 3032. The applicant, KMO-361 Realty Associates LLC, property located at 550 East Lancaster Avenue and zoned PB, planned business. The applicant seeking relief from Section 280-123B of the zoning code to permit installation of 2 wall signs higher than 15 feet above existing grade. Applicant ready to proceed?
Yep. Good evening. I am. Daniel Rowley, R-O-W-L-E-Y. Thank you. My name is Daniel Rowley. I'm here tonight representing KMO 361 Realty Associates, LLC, the owner of the St. David Square Shopping Center at 550 Lancaster Avenue. The property is primarily located within the PB Planned Business Zoning District. There is a small portion that is zoned residential that acts as a buffer to the neighborhood. It is a 24-acre parcel developed with a shopping center that consists of over 220,000 square feet of floor area. This is, we believe, the largest shopping center in Radnor Township, and we would submit that its overall health and viability is important not just to the applicants and the tenants of the property, but also to the township as a whole. You may recall that we were here last year in September of 2018 regarding this property, and at the time explained the current status of the shopping center and the efforts of the shopping center owner to update the center. At that time, we discussed the re-tenanting of the property, the Bed Bath & Beyond space in particular, and we discussed the introduction of the Old Navy and the Home Sense to the shopping center. We discussed at length that the challenges that a shopping center faces, not just market conditions, but also the physical circumstances and impediments which diminish the viability of various buildings within the center. On that evening, we were seeking relief for new signs for the Old Navy and the Home Sense. This board granted that relief, which included relief to permit their signs to exceed 15 feet in height under section 280-123B. Since that time, the owner has continued to try to revitalize and improve the center. Specifically, there are continuing changes afoot in the center, and specifically the tenant Micro Center, which currently occupies the entirety of one of the buildings on the property, a separate 50,000 square foot building, is reducing its footprint. The Micro Center will reduce its leasehold by about 25,000 square feet, by half. And they will move to the eastern portion of that building. The space in the western portion of the building, vacated by the Micro Center, is going to be re-tenanted with a Home Goods. We are here this evening, similar to last year, seeking to facilitate that re-tenanting and what we believe to be a significant improvement at the shopping center. We are here this evening requesting dimensional variances for 2 wall signs that would be located on the front building facade of the Micro Center building. As with the space we discussed last year, the location and configuration of the Micro Center building has a very large setback from Lancaster Avenue, and the grade differential between Lancaster Avenue and the shopping center site work to limit visibility for this building and the retail tenants. As a result, in order to move forward with this reallocation and relocation of the tenants in the shopping center, both tenants are requesting approval to allow their signs to be mounted higher on the building than the 15 feet limitation in 280-123B. As testimony will show, and I believe this board has agreed with in the past, The sign regulations in question have a one-size-fits-all approach to wall signs. In particular, Code 280-123B, which we're talking about here today, limits the height of any sign to 15 feet without regard to the physical characteristics of a site or a building. No consideration is given to the size of the building, the size of the space occupied by the business, the size of the property, topographical conditions, or setbacks from adjoining roadways. In this case, this building and this property have several unique physical circumstances that create a hardship as it relates to the tenants. They include a large setback from Lancaster Avenue, the size of the shopping center is large, the buildings are large and tall, and there is also a fairly dramatic grade change between the shopping center property and the roadway on Lancaster Avenue that diminishes the visibility of the businesses. I have some exhibit packages to hand out, if I could do that.
And are these the same packages that were provided with the application?
No, these are different.
Okay, thank you.
Their application is A1?
Yes, let's, thanks, George, thanks. Let's mark the application as A1, and then we'll see what we get.
I'm sorry, if we could mark the, I have these numbered already.
Oh, you've already got the number,
So
okay.
if we could mark the application as A7, I think that would work smoothest.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Keep my thinking to a minimum.
Thank you.
Need one for the file, too.
Yes, one more, please. All right, so I don't need this one.
Okay, please continue.
And tonight I have two witnesses with me, Patrick Spellman, a civil engineer, and Ken Marshall, the head of retail for the company that manages the property. And unless anyone has any questions, I'd like to call Patrick Spellman.
Please proceed.
Patrick Spellman. Spellman? Sorry? Patrick Spellman. There we go.
Mr. Spellman, could you describe your educational and professional background?
Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from Lehigh University, 1984.
Go Mountain Hawks.
I'm an engineer. Before. And yeah, 30 years plus civil engineering and registered professional engineer in the state of Pennsylvania for 26 of those 30 years.
And Mr. Spellman, if you turn to Exhibit 2, A2, excuse me, is that a copy of your CV?
Is it? Oh, there it is. Yes, it is.
And I'd like to admit Patrick Spellman as an expert in civil engineering.
Without objection.
Mr. Spellman, are you familiar with the St. David's Shopping Center and the general area?
Excuse me. Yes, I am.
And turning to Exhibit A3, can you use this to just briefly describe the property and the surrounding area?
Yeah, so to orient you, Route 30 is going diagonally across the plan from the upper left, going east to the lower right. Radnor Chester Road is the dogleg road here in the lower right corner. The property, excuse me. So the property is outlined in red in the center of the aerial.
And turning to Exhibit A4, did your offices prepare these plans?
We did.
And using Exhibit A4, can you describe the existing conditions on the property?
Excuse me. I can. So again, to orient you, Route 30 at the top of the plan. There are 4 buildings on the property. The largest of which is in the center, the old B. Altman department store. It is a 2-story building. The lower level is accessed from the front parking lot to the north. The upper level access from the back parking lot on the south. The 2 levels are not connected, I don't believe. Over here on the west side is an outbuilding, a small 1-story outbuilding that has 4 tenants in it. By the entrance drive to the north is the PNC Bank outbuilding, and then the building that we're interested in on the east side of the property, which currently has Micro Center. There are 2 access points for this building, for this property, both off Lancaster Avenue. Ivan Avenue is right here. There is no access from Ivan to the property. The main entrance is on the eastern side, Middle Eastern side, we'll call it. The it's where the majority of the traffic from Radnor Chester Road and the Blue Route and further east would come in. It's controlled by a traffic light, which allows all movement. On the west side, there is another.
Yeah, I think you're...
Battery dead. Of course, it made a lot of noise putting it there, didn't it? Yeah. West. On the west side entrance, a traffic light. Also, they come into the building. Also, of particular interest is the frontage of the property. As you can see, well, not so well in the photo, but there's a large hill here. It runs about 20 to 30 feet high as you go east along Lancaster, and some very nice landscaping and mature trees along this property. I think I hit everything.
Mr. Spellman, what is the front yard setback to that? Sure. Mr. Spellman, what is the front yard setback for the Micro Center building?
Yes, the setback on the property, the building setback is 100 feet. To the Micro Center is a little over 240 feet, more than twice the distance.
And drawing your attention to Exhibit A5, which is a series of photos of the site that were pulled from Google and Bing. Could you describe these photos?
Sure. So the first photo, A5A, is on Lancaster Avenue, about halfway between the 2 entrances, looking to the southeast. And what you can see here is the beginning of the hill. It's less steep, it's still steep, but less steep on the west side of the property than in front of the Micro Center building. So you can see the hill starting to develop. That's the red there is the bank, and that white back there is the Micro Center building. And there's no seeing the sign at this point. You gonna stick with that? Yeah, okay.
So moving to Exhibit A5B, could you explain what you see in that photograph?
Yes. We're moving further east on Lancaster Avenue. We're right about here. Again, still looking southeast towards the building of interest. You can see the bank building and its drive-through overhang there, and then the white behind that is the Micro Center building. Still pretty tough to see the facade.
And moving to Exhibit A5C.
So now we are at the intersection of the main entrance, looking again southeast. And here you can see a little better how this side of the property is higher than this side. And this is where the 20-foot hill starts. Excuse me. The Micro Center building, the sign is behind this tree from this view.
The current sign.
The current sign. Thank you. Thank you very much. Current sign, which is at a little under 15 feet.
And moving to Exhibit A5D.
We've moved further east past the intersection. We're just on the other side of the intersection, pretty much looking due south at this point. And you cannot see at this point, if you haven't seen the signs back, you no longer can see the buildings between the slope and the mature trees.
Quick question, Counselor. So if we're going back to A5D, I think we'd all agree that if you're heading westbound on Lancaster, you're not going to see any signs. I don't care how, unless you're putting them up in the air another 30 feet, you're not going to see any signs. So the westbound will never see any signs unless they passed it.
Correct. What we're trying to demonstrate with some of these photos is how important that eastern view is, because it cuts off completely at a certain point. So the visibility from the heading eastbound on Lancaster Avenue and being able to have those signs up so people on the road will be able to see is of vital importance.
And so you're not trying to justify the signs for when people actually pull in to that street, the little street that cuts off the two buildings, for them to be able to see where they should go?
The driveway?
The driveway, yes.
Well, that's a part of it as well.
Okay.
I think there's visibility issues even pulling into that driveway. What we can show you using these Google images is that view shed on eastbound on Lancaster is also of importance.
But you don't have any pictures, if we're going back to A5C or B or A, that are actually coming from the eastbound side? So meaning if you're coming eastbound on Lancaster, as opposed to this, these were kind of taken on the westbound side. So so the hill's more of a factor when you're on the eastbound side than you're on the, again, it's a wall sign, I get what I'm doing. I'm just trying to make sure that the record is clear that it will be useful even in the eastbound lane if you're on the far right-hand side, because the pictures are coming from the westbound line, where I think the sight line is it's a lot easier. You can see it a lot clearer.
Well, if you look at Exhibit A5C, that's taken from just about that median. So I think it does demonstrate that eastbound lane. It's not perfectly in that lane, but I do think it demonstrates that eastbound view.
That you'd be able to see the Micro Center sign, which is going to be the farther one?
Yes.
Where would that Micro Center sign be in this picture? Do you happen to, can
I'm
you
assuming
estimate?
you're going to go through elevations and whatnot.
Yes, we do have elevations.
But in this picture, where would it be?
Patrick, if you could point that out.
Yes, if I can get my orientation, it's going to be, the Micro Center sign would be here. The Home Goods sign would be about here. I mean, as best as I can tell on this.
And I think that goes to the point that there are visibility issues from there. You certainly wouldn't be able to see it, the Micro Center sign, at a lower elevation. I think raising it up gives it the best chance to be visible from that street. Mr. Spellman, I believe we left off, and correct me if I'm wrong, on Exhibit A5E.
Okay. Okay, A5E is at the intersection of Ivan and Lancaster, looking southwest at the corner of the property. You can see down the sidewalk of the property. You can see the mature trees, you can see the hill, but as you pointed out, not the building.
And the final exhibit photo portion, Exhibit A5F.
Excuse me. Yeah, so this is standing in the parking at the Micro Center parking lot over here on the east side, looking back at the buildings, looking west back towards the buildings, showing the overhang. This is 10 feet. The overhang's 10 feet high, and the signs would go on this face here and here. The face itself, I'm sorry, I don't know exactly how high it is, but it's higher than our signs.
Okay. Mr. Spellman, do you have an opinion as to whether the physical conditions of the property impact the visibility of the signage that is permitted on the facade of the Micro Center building?
Yes, between the between the hillside and the vegetation, your view is limited as you're coming down Route 30.
And Mr. Spellman, in your opinion, is this a unique property in the neighborhood, and for that matter, the township when it comes to signage issues?
Yes, I mean it is, as we said before, we believe it's the largest shopping center, with the buildings set fairly far back. The way the ordinance is written, it applies to more of a village commercial area, the center of Wayne, where you have the smaller buildings up against the road, and you don't want to be overwhelmed by larger signs standing up in the air. But here, with the setback distance, it seems a larger sign would be warranted. Also, it helps. It will help break up these large building facades. They're just a blank canvas, wanting to be broken up by something, which is what the tenant is, what the owner is doing, is making these buildings more appealing, and the sign will help do that.
And we're going to have a second witness talk about the renderings, but Mr. Spellman, are you generally familiar with the proposed signs?
Yes.
And based on that knowledge, as well as your familiarity with the center and the surrounding area, in your opinion, would the proposed signs be out of character with the surrounding area?
No, I wouldn't think so.
Are you aware whether these signs were reviewed by the Township Design Review Board?
Yes, they were, February 13th, a couple weeks ago.
And what was their opinion or recommendation?
So they approved, so there are some facade changes going along with this, and they approved that. They also approved the signs conditional on zoning approval, that they thought it was, like the previous review they had done on the B. Altman building, they thought it was a good upgrade of the buildings, making them more stylish. In fact, I believe they even had a suggestion about how to take the facade around the side, and Mr. Marshall could confirm this, but I believe the owner is going to take their suggestion and continue the ephes stucco around the side to help make the side a little bit more attractive.
And in your professional opinion, will there be any detrimental impact if the board were to grant the relief requested here tonight?
No.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for Mr. Spellman.
Okay, are there any questions for this witness from the board?
Just one, what's the existing height of the Micro Center sign today?
The top of the sign here is a little under 50, it's a couple inches under 15 feet. So
In
it's,
conformance.
like I said, so it's 10 feet. I don't know if it complies by size, because I didn't check that, but I guess it does. But height-wise, it complies.
And do you know whether that sign predated our sign ordinance?
I do not know.
I'm not aware of that.
And is the size of the sign being proposed to be changed as well?
The size of the sign will conform with zoning ordinance.
But it is going to be bigger than what it is today.
Yes.
Okay.
No other questions? No. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to call Ken Marshall.
I do. Ken Marshall?
Mr. Marshall, with whom are you employed?
Olshan Properties is my employer.
And what is your position with Olshan Properties?
I am head of
the retail division for Olshan Properties. We are the manager of the property in then St. Damon Square.
And how long have you been employed with Olshan?
Approximately 2.5 years.
I have marked as Exhibit A1 a copy of the deed evidencing that the property subject to this evening's proceeding is owned by KMO 361 Realty Associates LLC. Can you confirm that that's the case?
That is the case, yes.
Is KMO affiliated with your employer, Olshan?
Yes, KMO is an affiliate of Olshan. There are members of Olshan Properties that are also members of the KMO organization.
And am I correct that in your position you oversee leasing of various holdings, including this shopping center?
That is correct, yes.
And can you describe the difficulties in leasing vacant retail spaces in today's market?
Yes, I mean, I think we've all seen the numerous bankruptcies that have occurred over the last several years, high-profile bankruptcies such as Toys R Us. We've got Payless Shoes that's declaring bankruptcy. We have other retailers that are telling us that they're having difficulties. We have small shop tenants such as Gymboree closing. So that's putting pressure on the whole retail bricks and mortar system. And I think everyone's familiar with, Amazon.com and the propensity of our consumers to use online shopping and in direct competition with bricks and mortar retail.
And is it fair to say that tenant identification and visibility are critical to leasing and ultimately success for a retail tenant?
That's correct. All of our tenants are sort of interested in being a part of the community and making sure that the community is aware of their presence and location.
And to your knowledge, are there any characteristics of the space that will be occupied by the Micro Center and the Home Goods that make it difficult to lease for retail purposes?
Yeah, I think our civil engineer has talked about some of the difficulties with respect to the general visibility of the building, the grading change in front of the center. So I think all those things are affecting the leasability of the center. Additionally, the building at 50,000 square feet is larger than any one tenant would want. We've obviously Micro Center is interested in downsizing, and the stable of larger tenants that would take spaces like that diminishes, seems like on a daily basis. So we're it's important for us to be able to divide that building now.
And are you familiar with the proposed signs for these tenants?
Yes.
And turning to Exhibit A6, can you describe the signs and any other improvements that KMO proposes for this space?
Yes. So similar to the facade renovation that we proposed for what was formerly the Bed Bath & Beyond building, we proposed to create a facade renovation here that would make the building look more contemporary, more in line with current retail design standards. We're creating simple facade pop-up areas for the tenants that would be above or near the tenant entries. And then we're providing for sort of a signage area, if you will, for both Micro Center and Home Goods as represented on the building. It was referenced earlier that the Design Review Board suggested that we continue the ephes around the corner for the Home Goods store, and we're in agreement with that. We'll be doing that so that ephes material will wrap the corner. You can see it here. Instead of the wood material, the ephes will wrap the corner and sort of strengthen that corner, which I think what the Design Review Board wanted to see.
And does this exhibit show the relative size of the signs compared to the facades of the building?
Yes. We've worked with both of these tenants to comply with the ordinance with respect to the size of the signs. So in fact, both signs are smaller than what the code would allow at 60 square feet. The Micro Center is, I think, closer to 52 or 53 square feet, and the Home Goods is slightly less than 60 square feet. They are internally illuminated signs, metal channel letters that would have a face that would be illuminated.
And in your opinion, will the proposed signs help to break up the large overhang areas of the building?
Yes, I think that they do. I think we feel like our architects have done a good job in creating a nice composition between the width of the building, creating distinct facade areas for the tenants, and then allowing the signs to be appropriately sized within those areas.
And in your opinion, are the signs that are being proposed the minimum that these tenants believe is necessary for their successful operation?
Yes, that's what they've told us.
And if we are unable to obtain approvals for these signs, will it affect whether the tenants agree to the renovations and reallocations of space within the center?
Yes, both tenants have told us that without this approval, they won't be proceeding with these projects.
And do you believe that the proposed signs, if approved, will negatively impact the remaining tenants of the center or the surrounding neighborhood?
I do not.
That is all the questions I have for Mr. Marshall.
Questions from the board?
The signs that were approved back in September, were they installed?
They have not been installed yet, no.
Okay.
I had a question, Ken. Is you said it was the signs were illuminated?
They are.
Is it just the letters, or is it
It
the
is.
full face?
It is just the letters. The letters are internally illuminated letters. Yes, similar to, I guess, the TJ Maxx sign that's at the center now.
Okay.
Similar to that,
Okay.
if you're familiar with that.
Yes, I am.
I just have a couple quick questions. Home Goods is a current tenant in the center, is that correct?
They are.
And is their lease coming due, or they're just they want a more prominent location, or what's happening there?
They're interested in a different location from where they are today.
Okay, and generally, so that will leave you with some vacancy that you'll need to fill on that other side.
Correct.
Of the second level.
We don't want to lose them as a tenant.
Sure. No, I understand that. And you talked a little bit about visibility impacting the leasability of the center. The Bed Bath & Beyond space has been or is vacant for how long now?
They closed, I believe, in January of 2018.
Okay. So then you were able, obviously, we've seen the request for the variance for the new tenants that you're putting into that space.
Correct.
But that process took how long between the vacancy from Bed Bath & Beyond and the signing up of the new tenants?
It took, I guess we were here in September, so it took we knew that Bed Bath & Beyond was leaving before they left, so it took approximately a year to be able to bring those deals forward.
And is that a characteristic marketing period for a space or atypical in any way?
I mean, it completely depends on the location. I'd say that is maybe a little longer than what we're used to. We have, for instance, just anecdotal, we have 2 Toys R Us buildings. They both closed in July of last year, and both are already re-tenanted, but they were in locations with visible signage and buildings sort of up front and center.
That's all I had. Any other questions?
What were the lease terms for Home Good? How long have they been in there, and what's the term left on their lease?
I don't know the exact term of their current lease. And I believe it comes due in several years, but they're interested in relocating to a new space.
And if they relocated, they would pay some penalty to break the lease?
I mean, if they were to leave and go someplace else, yes, they'd have to, if they were to leave today, they would owe us for that rent. Yes.
And at the time that they took possession of that space, the signage was not a concern for them.
Their current space?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it was a concern or not. I don't know. I was not here during the time that they initiated tenancy.
I will say the current Home Goods is also on the rear of the property next to the Giant, so there's not street visibility issues with that. It's facing.
They never
the other
expected
direction.
street visibility. Okay.
Correct.
Yep.
I think the other thing is that, I mean, I believe the lease is at least 10 years old, maybe not quite, maybe 8 years old. So it was a different time and place for that retailer.
Sure. Understood. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And I had lengthy opening remarks, so I'm not planning on giving closing remarks unless you have any further questions of me.
Any questions for council? No? Okay, would you like to move your exhibits?
I would.
Okay. All right. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak to this application? Seeing none, I would appreciate a motion to get conversation started.
I motion that we approve a variance under section 123B, specifically, not to the whole section, but with regards to wall sign being higher than 15 feet, and that the variance be subject to the height restrictions set forth in Exhibit A6. So meaning they can't go higher than what they have on the drawings.
As reflected in the plan.
Correct.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chair, if I could just, and to make it clear that it's for 2 signs. Correct, 2 signs. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Second the motion.
Board discussion?
I think this is similar to the one from September. I think the hardship that exists is associated with the topography of the site. I think all the other elements that were suggested as hardship, I think were good efforts, but essentially smoke and mirrors. The thing that is not caused by the property owner is the topography. I think that's what makes some uniqueness to this, and I think that it's the minimum amount of relief necessary to allow them to make appropriate use of the buildings as retail. And I'm also sensitive to the challenging retail environment. I don't see a whole lot of impact upon the neighbors or upon the broader community other than just providing sign ID. So I'm supportive of the motion.
I mean, though I think I believe that the Micro Center sign is never going to be visible anywhere. To me, it doesn't make sense to grant all the other ones, and I think there's an aspect of consistency that you need to have. And if it would be nice if we had winter pictures, because maybe then we would have been able to see it with the. And I'm hopeful that would be the case, and so I'm supportive of it as well.
For me, seeing as there's no objection from the public on this as well, it gives me, a little bit more confidence that this isn't going to have a negative impact basically on the community, so I'm supportive as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the reasons are for the 15-foot rule, other than we don't want it to look like Times Square, but this is nothing like that. It's a, for lack of a better term, it's a shopping center. There's no surprise that they'll have signs in front of their stores, so I'm in favor.
All right, I'd like to call a vote on the motion. All in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. Good luck with the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
And that concludes our proceedings for this evening. We will see you next month. Thank you.